And welcome back to this Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin. I'm here with Anthony Doerr. Anthony is an award-winning Idaho author whose latest book is Memory Wall. It's a collection of stories, both novellas and short stories. I'm pleased to have you here. Thanks for staying a little bit after the program. I wanted to ask you about the e-book phenomenon, the Kindles, the iBooks. What do you think? Obviously, your books are going to be appearing on these devices, right?
Yeah. Simon & Schuster, my publisher, has, I think, all of their titles on the Kindle, and you know, I don't want to be a Luddite about it. I'm very fond of paper books, but I understand that convenience and the incredible density, the ability to carry 1,000 books in your backpack amazes me. So I don't want to dismiss the Kindle at all, but I write in almost everything I read. I underline, I star, I fold things down, I kind of engage with the paper. So it'll be very hard for me to relearn how to read.
I did that, I think, with your book, sorry, but I did turn down some pages as well. I'm like that too. I'm kind of conflicted on this because on the one hand, I like to have the book with me because I see spatially. I like to see both pages and I like to flip ahead and see how much. But, you know, on an airplane, you can't carry them all a lot of times, especially with the new policies.
Right.
So I don't really know what to think. I'm going to try it, I think.
The business side of it's fairly interesting to me also in terms of, you know, my royalty on a hardcover, for example, is 12.5%. And right now I think my ebook royalties are only 5%. But if you decide that, and I hope my publisher isn't watching, but if you decide maybe someday to sell directly, say, from your website, or say I can upload a short story I've written to Amazon and a buyer can go buy it for $2, maybe I could get 50% of that or something. So that all still needs to be worked out. And one last thing that's very interesting to me about the iPad in particular is short stories. I feel like just in the way iTunes has really demolished the idea of an album, and most people aren't necessarily buying all say 9 songs on an album. I feel like short stories can find a way to be sold as singles. So somehow you can drive the short story reader towards those electronic markets.
And would that be good? I mean, Memory Wall holds together like an LP or an album does because it's all stories about memory. As one-offs, as you call them, would it work as well?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, when I was writing this, I was still thinking paper book, and I'll arrange it between 2 covers. But I think it's interesting to try to think maybe a reader will go download 1 story a night, and it'll be by a different author every night.
It's like a jukebox.
Yeah, like a jukebox, like an iPod.
Yeah,
really.
right.
Only for
and so
stories.
you don't know yet how you feel about that, about your work being split up.
I don't, but I'm not opposed to it necessarily.
Interesting.
You know?
Well, I want to get back to some of our recommendations from people on Facebook. They're pretty fun. Here's from Kelsey, a book recommendation called Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, War Stories from the Local Food Front. I looked this up. It discusses, she says, how our regulatory system hinders sustainability in the agricultural realm. It's very interesting, and I'll be able to use the knowledge to help make change in Idaho. So this is a hot topic, local food, and one of our treasures in America, Barbara Kingsolver, picked up on this theme a while ago and wrote Animal Vegetable Miracle, which is recommended by Monica on our Facebook page. It's about eating locally for a year. So hot topic there.
Very much.
And moving on from Sue, we have a recommendation of Half of a Yellow Sun. This is by, and I hope I pronounce her name correctly, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Adichie. Yeah.
She spoke in Boise not too long ago as part of the Log Cabin series. And Sue says, after hearing her talk, I bought this book thinking I'd save it for vacation. However, once I started it, I couldn't put it down. A novel set during Biafra's struggle to become an independent republic, the 5 main characters are unforgettable. As she said at her talk, she wrote this so that we would always remember the tolls of war, something she really accomplished. And from Cease on the website, a recommendation kind of related, a book called Little Bee by Chris Cleave. This is a story of a 16-year-old Nigerian orphan who calls herself Little Bee and a well-off British couple, journalists who are trying to repair their strained marriage with a free holiday, and how their lives intertwine with one another. And from Jeff, this is a book that I want to read called The Help by Catherine Stockett. Eugenia Skeeter Phelan is just home from college in 1962, and she's anxious to become a writer, and she is advised to write about what disturbs you. So she begins to collect the stories of the black women who are the maids in her world. And this book has gotten many write-ups, again, called The Help. Do you agree that that's an interesting thing to do, to write about what disturbs you? I have given that same advice, although a little bit modified, to students studying journalism. Write about something that's out of your comfort box.
Yeah.
You know.
And I have had students do a very similar exercise. What disturbs you, I haven't tried, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I think it's always really interesting to ask students to juxtapose two very strange and different elements. So maybe one of those things would be something disturbing. You know, you take grandmother and you take a beached whale or something, you know, and see it. Somehow immediately there's a story implied if you have two very opposed elements to a story. So maybe it has something to do with that.
Well, you talked in our main program about how you're drawn to the World War II era, the Holocaust era, and that certainly is a disturbing era, disturbing to think about and disturbing to write about. How do you get your mind focused in and settled down to write about such a tragic time in history?
I'm working on it. I think for me, it has to do with memory. You know, as we were talking about earlier, so many people for whom World War II is memory are passing away. Every day we're losing more and more people for whom that war was real, and it becomes something like history, like that previous book recommendation, All the Lies My Teacher Told Me, where history is something much more malleable. I mean, memory's malleable, but once the people who can remember an event are gone, history can pretty quickly be changed by whoever has the power to change it. And so I'm very interested that in World War II in particular, because it's still in some ways the determining narrative of our time, and yet it's entering this space in which, if we're not careful, if we don't carefully guard those memories, what World War II can become is very quickly something like the video games you see about World War II. Good versus evil, everything's very clear, and it becomes less about, could this ever happen again, or what decisions were made that we can avoid.
I know I'm researching a program that'll be on next week about the 60th anniversary of the Korean War, and I've been talking to Korean War veterans all week long, and to be honest, some of them just will not, they can talk to me on the phone, but the idea of coming on television and talking about these stories, it's too painful for them. And I have tried to make the pitch, as you just said, that, you know, if you keep it all silent, nobody will ever know about it.
Right.
And but for some people, it's too hard to place. Fortunately, I have found some veterans who are willing to tell their stories, and I think that's very important, because that particular war is known as the forgotten war. So, but you need those people, or those Holocaust survivors, that are willing to step forward and talk about these incredibly painful things. Are you going to write, do you think, memoir again, truth, or you enjoying being in the realm of fiction?
Yeah, I'm much more at home in fiction. If something very interesting, you know, that memoir came about just because we lived in Rome for that year, and Rome's reality kind of overwhelmed the fictional lives of my characters.
This is 4 seasons in Rome, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe if our lives become very interesting again, but I kind of like living a nice, quiet life in Boise and then making up very dramatic things to go on in my characters' lives.
Well, those of us who read your works are glad you do. Thank you very much for joining us both for the program and for this Web Extra. You've been listening to Anthony Doerr. Anthony is an Idaho writer, and his latest book is called Memory Wall. I encourage you to read it. Thanks so much, and thanks for tuning into this Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin.